Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Michelle Dennedy, Vice President, Chief Privacy Officer, Cisco.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Is it working? Brilliant. So we're actually trying a new solution. So we're doing a type-to-text hearing application. So it's going to be typing and texting as we're going. Thank you and welcome, and thank you not all for fleeing. I was getting worried at the end of our last session that you'd given up on the day in the world of solutions. So thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here. I came here last year to kick off some work that we were doing in privacy engineering in advance of GDPR coming online for enforcement in Europe and all the changes that have been going on here in Australia and New Zealand as well on the encryption side, on the privacy side. So let's get right started and dig into privacy engineering, a bridge to the possible. So we've got an hour together. So if you'd like to pose a question or dive in, please, please, please. I say it in every session. I do want to be interactive. You never listen to me. I may call on people and have karaoke if we don't actually participate here. And I know we have a taker in the front row, so he's actually quite good. So with that, I want to first shape the conversation by talking about something that I assume that many of us are talking about, but maybe not actually innovating toward, which is the knowledge and the awareness that data has everything connected. Everything is generating data. We live in the information age, do we not? However, are we planning for this? Are we building a solution for this? Are we preparing for a world where we need dual book accounting for data assets? Or have we just really begun in the world of innovation to imagine a future where data is so ubiquitous and treated as an asset with the primacy as are our other tools in government and in private life? So in general, we look at Cisco across our security and trust organization. I actually report up to Irving Tan, who gave us our keynote this morning. He's our Chief Operations Officer. That's not him right now. He's like, oh, don't talk about me. We also have another branch that lives in legal, a more traditional hosting spot for privacy professionals, controlling where the policy is going, doing teaching, understanding what our limitations are. But at Cisco, of course, as in everything else, we bridge to possible. We don't believe that privacy or security is a limiting factor. In fact, we think it is the connective bridge. So we look at how do we integrate, number one, weaving security, privacy, trust initiatives into the fabric of the people and the process as we build along. So putting my organization within the bounds of COO allows me to reach into engineering practices, into our people deal, into our public policy persona, as we look comprehensively of how is data actually driving our business, how are we changing, how we are partnering with our partners, what does our channel mean, what does quality mean, asking those large existential questions to build security and have a secure and contained and controlled environment, and then letting loose and having all the innovation as possible across the world. We plan and prepare for the unexpected. In security, we all know about the unknown. We know that somehow, somewhere, someone will either crawl into our HVAC system and get into our retail environments and steal data. We know that contractors may or may not always be faithful with our information and data. We know that there will be different types of uses that we haven't even anticipated, and so you prepare for the unexpected, the 0 day, as well as the mundane and the known. And so we try that out, we culture for it, we plan for it, we do tabletop exercises, etc., and then we make sure that our building profile and our culture is rising up to meet those challenges of an ever-changing data landscape. And then we measure. So this has been the piece, and we will get into this in this next hour together as we talk about what is privacy engineering, what is data and data valuation, and how do we bring all these things together so that we can actually have real measurement other than in the traditional security sense, has nothing happened today? It feels a bit like talking to our teenage children, does it not? What happened today? Nothing. That used to be success for security. We are not the team of nothing anymore. We are the team of did we empower mobility? We are the team of did we build a bridge across and have networking and telepresence and all sorts of data stories being told going forward in a very interactive way. We are no longer the data metric of did nothing happen today in security. It's a little more exciting. So this is a really interesting thing. We did some studying around, we did a couple double-blind studies as well as some really interactive studies with our customers. And the bottom line here with this interaction with the customers just said, listen, companies, you have to be good data stewards. We are in it with you. Our brand is your brand. You can't offload your risk. And so the bottom line is, if you're not a good data steward, we will not do business with you. If you have 30 seconds with your CEO, this is the line that you choose. We must invest in this area. So how do you maximize the value of data? And this probably should be a more circular format, as with everything else. As we're building up the stack of data, the one thing you really needed to do to get started with your GDPR readiness, to get ready for a breach notification schema here in Australia, know thy data. It's the first commandment from your privacy officer and your security officer. Where is your data? The who, what, why, when, and how. And how did we do that last year? Well, globally, we spent over $6 billion US in hiring accounting firms with clipboards to come in and ask this gentleman, where's your data? And you would tell me the answer, and I would write it down, and I would put it in a spreadsheet, and I'd walk over here, and I'd say, Chief Stroopwafel Officer, where's your data? And I would write it down. That's actually her title, the Chief Stroopwafel Officer. And you would write it down. And so we filled out all these spreadsheets, and we felt so good because we had data. But really, why are we interrogating human beings about what a system is doing? Do we not have APIs? Can we not use machine learning to actually ask an API what is sending on to the next system? So that's the next level. What are these controls that can help you boost your awareness for where the data is and control it? Can you report your controls for compliance? We're still on that lowest base level plank of compliance. Now we're getting from the product or business operational internal focus. Now we look outward. We have our arms around the data. We know where the controls are. We know what our improvement plans look like. We know what our report out information is to our internal boards and stakeholders. Now we're looking out. This is what Irving Tan, our COO at Cisco, calls the democratization of data. And I have to say, as a privacy professional, I kind of scratched my head and said, this is very odd, because democracy feels like everything's equal, but it's actually not. Democratization means that we recognize the needs and the rights and the opportunities for data and data use and a data economy, and we have that access appropriately. Not everyone has the same protections in a democratized data platform, but the people that need the most data that's about people have to meet the guidelines so that they can be a fiduciary and a steward of that data. If you just need ambient weather data information, we can get you an analytic and keep you out of the back-end data sources. So we're looking at data in a very different way. Imagine handing out a budget and just saying, go spend what you will. We would never think about spending our currency that way. Why in the world would we use our data assets in such a manner? So democratization of data is really about, once you've set your controls in place, starting to really understand what you want to happen along with your brand and moral and ethical application and where you're going as a business. That gets you to the next level. What are those business insights based on that data? Are the right users using it? Are you using all your data sources, or might you not be data hoarding? We are data hoarders. You can admit it. Have you seen that show on television, Hoarders? Dirty Secret, a couple nods. I know you're watching it. The ones who are not nodding hardest, I know you're binging. We love as a society, and Marie Kondo, is she big down here? In the US right now, everyone's folding up their pants in like the little origami style, and she's so cute, she loves mess. Well, she'd love my house. Our data is like a pre-Marie Kondo house. We've been storing data and pretending that it's free for decades. We think that if we have more data, it's going to magically grow value. And yet, when you get real data insights about what kind of information is driving your business, driving your governmental agency, supplying services that are necessary, you find that data actually is more like a vegetable. It goes off in like 3 days. So hoarding it is not going to create more order. It turns into, like, obviously I'm raising teenagers. I've got like heaps of clothing. They don't smell any better the longer you keep them. Next time you walk in and you talk to your IT manager, that data ain't going to get any better. It's not going to get any more insightful. It's not going to build any more insights for us. So we have to curate it. We have to think about our data insights and how that becomes recursive to what we have and where we have and how we control. And that's when you get to the top of this pyramid, maximizing your data value. Now, when I first introduced this model in Europe, there was an immediate pushback. Maximizing data privacy. This is outrageous. Outrageous. You can't sell my data. I own my data. You can own your data if you have this model. You can interact with a company and have personalization and have data protection in this model. The key of maximizing value is a shared sense of values. So my 4-part model for any sort of innovation project, start with what is the moral imperative here. If I'm building an AI system, and my bias is, as a long-term geek, is you're probably not. You're probably building an ML system that is pattern matched, but we'll call it AI. It's sort of the soup du jour. If you're trying to build an insightful engine based on pattern matching at the top, based on lots and lots of data at the top, you really have to be concerned about the quality of the data going into that insight and pattern making. And you have to ask yourself at the end of the day the what-if questions. What if the information is biased against the party that I'm making judgments about? It's terrible grammar, but you get the gist of it. What if this information is not being levied by my beloved CEO, but we have a new change of CEO, has a totally different ethical outlook? What if, what if, what if? You have to get into the philosophy and the ethics and the morality. Second is what I'll separate from morality and I'll call ethics, and I apologize in advance to any true ethicists out there in the audience. Your ethics is your brand. What is Cisco's brand? What do you expect from us? You probably don't expect a ton of business to consumer direct stuff. We don't sell ads as a part of our business. Our ethic is around engineering. We're kind of dorky. Please laugh at that. We're not that dorky. Okay, maybe we are. We sometimes, yeah, he's like, yeah, you are. That's all right, we own it. Our ethic is that we sometimes engineer until it's like not just beta, but it's like 2.0 before we'll give up on our projects. So we're known for certain things. We're proud of certain things. Our brand stands for something. That's our ethic. Every agency, every company, every community service has an ethic. Now you get to commercially viable. You've already gone through 3 steps of the 4-parts test for innovation before you've done a speck of innovating. And that's commercial viability. What are the cultural, financial, and time-bound resources that you have at disposal for this project? And then finally, you get down to my hometown favorite, legal. Now, most of us are creating privacy-engineered systems starting with that model turned upside down. Is it legal? Is it commercially viable? Maybe you get into brand, and then maybe 7 months after launch, you're like, ooh, what was that thing that we did? So I suggest that you turn it on its head and think about innovating in a way that starts with these harder questions first before you start the build-out, and then work your way through so that by the time you get to legality, if you've covered morality, ethicism, commercial viability across the spectrum of what's possible, what's culturally sustainable, you're going to find that 9 times out of 10, you'll find yourself also in a very nice legal compliance case study for your lawyers. We're not all bad. So what is privacy? So if you're going to talk about a privacy brand, or a data protection ethic, what is privacy? We all feel like we have a colloquial understanding. Is it cloaking, secrecy? What do they know about me? Are you a privacy nihilist and believe, oh, all the data's out there anyway, there's nothing we can do, it's dead, get over it? Or do you take a system engineering approach and say, let's break this down into functional components? Privacy is the fair and legitimate processing of personally identifiable information. And I know this is a bit of a word salad slide, but we'll walk through it piece by piece. So fair information principles actually were recorded in the 40s, 50s, and then finally by the OECD here in Australia as early as the 1960s. The federal level law in the US actually applying to government data was in the early 1970s, all based on the fair information principles. If we were following and engineering the fair information principles, we were 99% ready for GDPR last year with a couple special nuances. Collection limitations, data quality, these are the old-fashioned things that you had to really prepare for back in the punch card days when you had one chance to get that code running first. We've sort of forgotten along the way as you pull down all sorts of open source code and tangible computing objects to remember proportionality, to remember data quality, to remember that storage is not free. It's actually a governance burden and potentially a surface area of attack. So fair information principles are your guiding components, and we're going to get into this in a little bit as we get into the guts of privacy engineering. It disappeared on me. Now it's back. What's the legitimate processing? This is where that four-part test comes in. Moral, ethical, commercially viable, and legal. Making sure you've got your consents in place, making sure there's proportionate. This is a knob that can turn. I often hear, particularly in the IoT world or cloud world or any sort of persistent computing, see, these guys are running off to do their privacy engineering right now. Good luck. See how mean I am? It's terrible. I got to be up here. Everyone else is in it with me. When you're looking at the legality thing, I think it's a really fascinating innovation stream because not everyone can consent. I was just talking to a gentleman who's working in your Veterans Affairs group. How do we get people with mental capability differences, with different physical abilities to actually know and understand the complement and the complexity of data sharing to say that the only way we're going to get to legality is by consent, checking a box? Answer, we cannot. So as a community, we have to figure out what's the turn on the wheel of legitimate and legal basis for processing. And then processing is a verb. We tend to forget after collection, after we plop down our little legal page that you click through, that your privacy journey has just begun rather than finishing all the way through end of life. And then finally, personally identifiable information, the definition of what's covered by data protection principles has vastly, vastly expanded now that we do have big data sources, parallel processing, lots of machine gathering, analytics based on multiple sources that can target an individual. So all of these things together start to sound more systems processing than ooey gooey legal. We'll burn some sage and write a privacy policy and be done with it. So now the excitement begins. It's a balancing act, but that doesn't just say that you can have privacy or you can have security. We've done this lovely little, dance. It's gotten us nowhere. We're dancing in circles. It is a balancing act based on risk, based on effectiveness, based on measurement going forward. And it's contextual. So we have many, many engineers who will tell you it's all about encryption. And then we'll have lawyers that say it's all about the language. And then we'll have other people, it's all about the no. Just say no. It doesn't work for a lot of different things, and it doesn't work for privacy either. See, I'm being circumspect. These guys are like, oh, you aren't going to say that other thing. No, I'm not. I'm being clean and non-explicit. I got the only explicit rating last year at Cisco Live for adult content, so I'm being cool this year. It's early yet. I got 35 minutes to go, so there may be some dropping later. So the path of curation is really think about the word curation. It's kind of my word of the year. If I had unlimited budget, I would privacy engineer the shit out of everything. Sorry, there we go. I don't have that kind of budget. If you'd like to throw it my way, I'm not going to say no. But think about when you're walking into even this world of solutions. We didn't just slap up a bunch of brightly colored things. We curated your path in the environment. When you walk into a very high-end fashion store, you know if there's just one shirt hanging in the window, that's going to be some expensive stuff. They've curated that environment so that you have to ask for personalized help, and you can't go and touch all their expensive merchandise. Alternatively, there's other experiences that we have where you want to sit down and you want to have a maitre d' and you want to have a cloth tablecloth. You're curating that experience, and you're creating value by doing so. So why haven't we started curating our data plans? We know that we have a ton of data. We have access to the world's data. Every third grader has Google. You used to have to sit down and read the Britannica encyclopedia to pretend you were smart. Now we have Google. We have to curate our information, ask harder questions, be more interrogatory with our information, our curation. So it's a discipline. It's innovation that has not yet happened but almost has. And it's really being data-centric and person-centric to tell that personally identifiable story about the people that are our employees, our customers, and our community members. So how do you curate your tech? Okay, how many techies are looking at this one going, holy smokes, man. That like hurts my brain. And then you see this beautiful ching, pretty explicit. And it seems kind of almost silly and quaint. It drives people crazy that are running data centers, and I can tell now by your body language who's been there and done that. Really fascinating. When Andy Bechtolsheim, I used to work at Sun Microsystems years ago. Andy Bechtolsheim is one of the founders of Sun Microsystems and one of the world's great hardware designers and imaginers. He actually wrote the check for Google. The boys were thinking about going back to their PhD program, and he had dinner one night at a friend's house and didn't say a word because he doesn't, and then handed them a check for $100,000 for Google Inc. I don't know how many of you guys know that story. It took the guys about 30 days to find a lawyer and incorporate as Google Incorporated, but in Andy's mind, we needed a search engine that was almost as good as Alta Vista. Do you guys even remember Alta Vista? Okay, there's a handful. So when Andy came back to Sun Microsystems back in the day, he actually went into our data centers, and the problem we had was energy. So we had scale. We hadn't yet had 2008. We had a lot of HVAC requirements and heat. And one of the first things he did is go from this to this and move the fans to the front of the pizza boxes. Small changes. We went from 90% of energy use in the data center down to 10% of usage just by having a curation of how our cords were attached to the back of the boxes and organized. Curation of your technology makes a difference. Why am I going backwards? Oh, because I'm hitting the red button. That was user error. All right. Have you guys been to an Ikea? I'm amazed that you're here. I can't get out. There are apps so that you can get out of an Ikea. Why? They don't want you to go. They want you to stay. The do and the don't here, and it depends on your plan. If you want someone to feel like they've gotten this grand bargain and they've been digging through the stuff, some people are digging this sort of thing. I don't like a lot of people touching my pants. I don't like that. That feels like a low-end experience to me. Jason's like, really? You got to go there? Don't touch my pants. I know I'm going to wash them later, but still, like something about rooting around in this kind of environment doesn't feel like a bargain. For other people, this is a great business plan. Ikea is brilliant. First of all, they keep you in the store. Secondly, they spend valuable real estate space, even in Silicon Valley, where we are something like $3,000 a square foot. They will lay out rooms and dorm rooms and kitchens so that you can imagine yourself living in that world with all that cool, clean stuff. They don't tell you how hard it is to put it all together at the end of the day, but if you need me, call me, I've done it. The other thing that's interesting about curating your environment, and I'll use the business plan from Ikea. How many couches do you think you've bought in your lifetime? 1, 2? No couches? All right, 5 couches here. We got about 3 over there. Anybody? Okay, you've moved a lot. Who's bought more than 10 couches in their lifetime? Probably nobody. Okay, 1. She's redecorating a lot, or I'm gonna come over to your house because you got a lot of room. The point is, not many of us, it's a rare occurrence. How many of you have eaten meatballs? Ever? Okay, vegans, noodles? Pasta? Okay, probably pretty frequently. You've eaten. What Ikea did is actually curate the price of their meatballs to be about $1.35 for a plate of meatballs. So in your mind, as the customer, you're thinking, these meatballs are cheap. And sure enough, you will translate and think this couch is probably well priced too. And it worked. So if you look at the business case of Ikea, by curating your experience in their on-site cafe and having Ikea branded meatballs, Swedish meatballs, in line with their ethic and their brand, that has translated into massive profitability based on their couch sales, because they've translated a standard experience into an unusual experience. Curation of our business plans, curation of our real estate, curation of the experience matters, and all of these are data-driven transactions. So now we get to the money shot. Why is this girl droning on business plans and we're supposed to be getting down to privacy engineering? This, my friends, if you are GDPR ready, is probably what your compliance profile looks like. Stacks and stacks and stacks of the proof that you gathered to get ready and document your data journey. You know, maybe it's on a computer somewhere, but if you print it all out, they're discrete documents, and it would take you quite a bit of time to figure out, what does my data flow look like? Where's my map? Where am I going? This is something we introduced on Data Privacy Day everywhere but in the US. Because it comes during your summer holidays, you have a whole week in May. But the rest of the world celebrates Data Privacy Day on January 28. This map represents, I call it a data map. I know, don't put me in marketing. I basically drew from the experience of the London Underground, where Lord Ashfield came in between 1917 and 1934 and took over an almost bankrupt multi-train system under the streets of London. The tunnels had been dug, the hardware was implemented, there were even these luxury Pullman-type cars, and yet it was between the 2 great world wars, not a lot of money, not a lot of fuel laying loose, and yet we needed to democratize getting around a city as complex and medieval as London. And so he joined together the business operations of the hardware and the software, the ticketing, so that people could actually have one united train system. And then he went the distance. So outside of the London Underground organization, an independent designer named Harry Beck came along, and he was inspired by the artist Piet Mondrian, who in this part of the last third of the last century had a remarkable inspiration of this blue and black and red blocks of color, which we all find pretty standard today, but 100 years ago, this was wildly different than the movement towards realism and even surrealism and cubism, and looked like something. So Harry Beck's idea was, we don't really need to know when we're underground exactly where all the applications are sitting on top. We don't need to know where every single street is. We don't need to know where the Thames is. What we need to know is, how can a school kid get on the Piccadilly line and navigate to school? How can the house mother go and get her shopping done and come back at a certain appointed time and know what the train is going to get from point A to point B, and a member of parliament and so on. It democratized travel across the different types of people wanting to use the system, across the ticketing system, and across the economic model that built and revitalized London in a way that helped it to survive after World War II. So I actually looked at that and I said, I want to go from here into something where I can sit down with each of you. This happens to be our Meraki map. So each one of these lines, even without being able to read that teeny tiny thing, top line is consumer, middle line is Cisco, bottom is third party. Standardized now for every map you're going to see coming out of Cisco. If I'm a lawyer, I'm looking at, is there a contract in place, and does it cover this transition of all these different types of data? There are 3 types of data here: the input registration, user-generated, and then system-generated data. Follow the lines of who's got what and where. I no longer am having arguments or confusion or liability conversations for stuff that doesn't come to me. I'm now looking at the stuff that I own, where I curate and I govern and I bring value. I also send the same map over to my lawyers, and you can see that Meraki has data centers in the United States and in Europe. So if you have to be jurisdictionally bound, you have to have a different kind of conversation with your customer about where is the information and do we need additional controls or different kind of auditing system to recognize that this is the basic layout. Do you need custom? So it's a way of navigating and democratizing our data. And we put them out into the public. We never put these behind a non-disclosure agreement because I want you to ask our competitors to do this. Because to get to this level of radical transparency means we had to actually be right. Now, it's not down to the last street, and it's as of a certain date. There will be dotted lines where we're building out services, et cetera, but you have a whole new way of navigating. I can communicate to my regulator, I can communicate to my partners, you can communicate to me of what your needs and requirements are because we're literally on the same page, looking at the same map together. This is the kind of privacy engineering that we're really talking about growing into the business. So this is a piece of imagination based on art, based on history, based on commercial use and ethics that we want to drive forward. It's an experiment. I have no idea if this is actually going to work or not. Now I'm excited because I didn't release it until we practiced it a little bit, and we actually used it with some of our sales teams in really sensitive jurisdictions. So I'm a little excited, but it's an experiment. It's a bridge to possible. What would happen if we actually just told you what we sold and how to get there? And could we go somewhere else together? So we'll get a little bit more into kind of the guts of operationalizing. At Cisco, there was no chief privacy officer until September of 2016 when I joined the company. There was legal teams, there were tons of great security people, but nobody was thinking data-centric, data privacy, data security. So we had a big run to hit. GDPR had already been promulgated, and we had a 2-year starting point before its enactment. We already had laws in Australia that were meeting on a local basis. We were meeting our banking requirements for our customers on a one-off basis. So we started by amassing a team. Half of us in legal. So I've got my legal team supports me globally, reporting up to that executive leader. My team doing strategy and data evaluation under Irving Tan, and then another whole team just doing compliance and mapping that data and going product by product, system by system, IT by IT, and acquisitions, and looking at where's our data. It's a very complex. We have 75,000 direct employees at Cisco, and if you add in all of our partner and supply chain network, we're probably at about 300,000 people that have access every single day to the Cisco network. So complicated, fast-moving train. Let's figure out how to build it fast. We instituted the privacy engineering practice, so I'm going to give you a little taste of that today, of how do we start sort of the privacy engineering academy and how do we share it with other developers and other technical teams around the globe. We've appointed global data protection officers. I've got one for APJ, Asia Pacific and Japan, including India. We have another data protection officer that is required under the GDPR. She sits in Brussels. She's Roman by birth, and she covers the whole EMIR, including Russia and the Middle East. And then I have one for the Americas, looking after public policy. Where are we going? We've got concepts in Brazil that's called data habeas data. So my data, my jurisdiction, it's a really sticky, evolving thing that's similar to the right to be forgotten, but with its own local kind of maracas. So Jonathan Fox looks after that as well. I added something to the mix that I think is a little bit fun, and I hope you'll try out. It's called the Privacy Sigma Writers Podcast. So I realized I used to run a sales team and a business development team at Oracle back in the day, and I realized that a lot of my guys were not sitting down and taking compliance training, like, hey, I've had a busy day meeting with customers today, and they're going to bring them money. You know what I'm going to do tonight, honey? I'm going to take me some training. No, that never happened. So what happens to salespeople and people on the move, executives? We get on airplanes, we get delayed, we're in our cars, we're taking planes, trains. So stick something in your ear and give me some 20 minutes of nugget. And so every other Tuesday, I drop a customer or I'll do an innovator at Cisco, someone interesting who's got something new to say about data. The last one that we dropped was actually myself and Mark Chandler talking about data as a fundamental human right. What does this announcement mean? Why is Cisco pushing this in the US? Is it a marketing stunt or is it a fundamental shift? P.S. fundamental shift, but listen to the show and I'll tell you more about it. At the Sigma Writers, we started this first annual data protection and privacy business study, riding off of the data that we were doing already under our annual cybersecurity report. We asked a whole new bench of executives, 3,200 of them around the world, what's going on with you and your data maturity programs? How does that correlate with the loss of data? How are you doing with laws like the GDPR, which was sort of the centerpiece of our time and attention last year? And then we correlated across things like data friction. If you invest in your data privacy team, I'll give you a spoiler alert on the report, you will see a remarkable and statistical improvement on your ability to close business faster in a data-centric world. You will see, if you get to even midway through your maturity journal, see, they're ready, they're so excited, they're going to do it right now. If you get even midway through your maturity cycle to have repeatable processes in privacy and security, you can expect to lose a third of the data records that you may have lost in the inevitable security breach. So we're seeing these statistical correlations across industries, so we can slice and dice across the industries, and we're publishing all of this information so that you can walk into your executive channels talking about value, real value, monetary value, cultural and ethical values. And then finally, the privacy engineering workbook is coming out probably in the next month or so. It's in the hands of the editors. It's taking the work that we did in the Privacy Engineers Manifesto from 2014 and really giving you practical work streams and programs that you can use to either train or get ready, use as tabletops, or test out your own privacy engineering environments. And again, that will be open sourced as well. CSDL, our cleverly branded secure lifecycle, secure development lifecycle, branded cleverly, the C is for Cisco. As a former trademark lawyer, I'm like, oh, that's such a bad choice. But there you go. CSDL has been with us for over 10 years at Cisco, which is super exciting. It means that we've been focusing on our product security for a long time. Now that we're getting more into clouds and recurrent services, we've had to extend out our SDL to a cloud environment, to new business acquisitions. We've made over 200 acquisitions over time. Of those acquisitions, we have over 70% of the founders and C-level executives from those startup companies that still work for Cisco today. Why? We don't just put them in cute little jumpsuits and say, I used to work for Duo. We embed them into the SDL. We embed them into our business process. We take the knowledge from small, agile companies and make a 75,000 person company faster and better. We do that because we've got these stages in our secure development lifecycle. So what's a new girl in town gonna do? I'm jumping in with a popular boy. That's what I did. So all of these embeddings that you see for privacy impact assessments, I put it in the SDL process because it already existed. Validating your controls, updating your PIA and controls during the validation, we already had QA. So I hopped on that jolly train. Over here on the operations side, updating our privacy sheet, making it easy to read and accessible, making a lawyer version and a map version, humans and lawyers. It's okay. Thank you, Jason. I was a lawyer back in the dark days, so he's being kind. And then the monitoring and planning for the future. It truly is a cycle, and we truly have to look at data at all stages because we know from the downside of security risk, there's always a vulnerability, and the less curated information, the less some executive is going to get fired because they're not looking at it every day, the more likely that the malware attackers are going to go after that data nugget and find their way in. And in an environment like Australia, many businesses are SMBs. I don't expect them to have these grand schemes of privacy officers and additional teams for operations. So we're trying to share as much knowledge as we can so that they too can find a way in and secure themselves as best they can so they're not infecting all of our other networks when we're trying to use and leverage everyone else's services in this digital economy. So if you're any sort of a developer, this schema probably looks kind of boring. And I say, good. Not everything can be new and shiny. I want you to know where new and shiny comes in. It comes in at the privacy engineering and development process as you would instantiate any project. The difference here is if you see the privacy policy, first of all, it happens very early in the cycle. You're not completing your development and then running into legal and saying, please cover my ass. No, we are not your granny pants. Okay, there's a little giggle. Your legal people are not going to cover your onions, people. Thank you. You have to start with your enterprise and user goals. This is where the ethics, this is where the brands, this is where the final capabilities and the metrics start at the beginning of the project. And then you write your privacy policy next, before you've even built anything. You can change it at the end, it's okay. That's what your lawyers are for. They will modify your panties, but they won't build them for you. Your privacy policy is your business plan for data. Look at it as you would any other investment plan. What am I capable of doing with data? What do I expect to happen here? What are the things I'm willing to disclose? And what are the things that are secret sauce? And if I've got secret sauce for security or any other legitimate purpose, how am I creating the trust model that I need to create? Once you've set your privacy policy, you start to look at requirements for systems. This isn't compliance requirements, remember. This is what are the privacy mechanisms? That's your technology stack. And then what are your procedures and processes? So you can have great technology and nobody's using it. You can have great types of IT-driven this and that, and yet everyone's doing BOD. So you have to look at these together. And then in the center, you've got your training in case you need to close the chasm between process, procedure, and mechanism. And then your QA process, and it goes back to the top. You're done when you're done in an agile environment. If this is a waterfall and you have the gift of endless time and budget, you can do this step by step. But typically we know this is typically parallel processing. But if everyone is literally on the same development page, you can understand and validate, is this in line with the data agreements that we made in the beginning of our privacy policy? So step 2, as we talked earlier, was really know your data. So now I've got a data plan. I've talked to my users, I've talked to my business owners, I've talked to the people who are actually going to use this kind of technology, and I ask a series of questions. All of these will be found in our workbook, so you don't have to go through the word salad here. But really understanding who all these stakeholders are so that you're scoping out what are the requirements for the system. The lovely thing is once I start saying specifications and requirements, like all my technical people are like, I'm back home again. When I say things like liability, quality, reliability, they're just kind of like, these sound like legal wishy-washy. Well, trustworthy, huzzah. When I say requirements and spec and built-in quality assurance and data assurance, We're back to talking technology. We're talking data flow. We're talking parallel processing. Whether you're a chip guy, a software guy, a cloud, born in the cloud person, you understand flow from 0 and 1. This is where you're starting to talk about what are those basic requirements for your systems. You now know your data and you've classified your data. What needs special handling, what can be publicized or made public, what needs special protection, etc. You go down your data ID, your confidentiality, and you start to really understand what is this asset I've got and how sensitive and how time sensitive is it. Now you set your controls. Now you've gone from enterprise to user to requirements to knowledge of your inventory. As you can expect, the controls start to appear. Do I need a fine-grained, multiple access layer? I'm going to really focus on identity controls. Is this something that if it is known to the outside world, that it could cause me a lot of immediate harm? You may want to put that encryption gate down quickly and make sure that at least people are slowed getting into the system. Or is this a time-sensitive thing? Do you need to get rid of the data very quickly after it's done because it's no longer useful? The day before we announce earnings, it's the most secret information we have in the entire company, and it can send Chuck Robbins, our CEO, to jail if it's leaked inappropriately. The day after earnings, we want to tell every blogger on the planet. So understanding how that system flow is and how it's impacted by circumstance is really critical, and then you can again focus on which control is appropriate for that context. You're capturing along the way. I love a user stories, and any of you who have played around with Agile or DevSecOps, you understand the power of user stories, because it also helps to risk-proof your systems. You're figuring out what is the user story over time. What does it look like if I'm coming in as the auditor? What does it look like from the view of the person who's managing the system? What does it look when I hand off from development into instantiation at our customers' offices, etc.? A user story allows you to sort of use your imagination to figure out how do we risk-proof and raise the quality bar on the system. And then being transparent. Your lawyers and data-specific people may need to see word-for-word specific things and have this conversation of possibility. If you're sitting down to figure out where you're going and what kind of a deal is this, that may be all your salespeople really need to know. And then they know how to click into the system deeper. If they need to know, for example, these little icons are where there's a discrete agreement. And you can click on that and say, do we have the appropriate controls for the national plan of my data, etc. So figuring out, not all these tools are useful for every single circumstance, and that doesn't mean that you're circumventing the detailed work that you need to have in the appropriate context. It just is it's a level setting and a context setting phase of transparency. And then operation is important. Culture, 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 culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. That has been true for 1,000 years. If you don't have a data-sensitive culture, then you need to limit access. If you don't have a security-centric culture, then you need to partner with someone who does. If you have a lot of different noise in your system, you need to figure out whether you have to have separate containers, separate systems, separate vendors. You need to build for your environment and know what your environment is and document so that when you're ready to do a digital pivot, you can say, whoa, we built for a very homogeneous type of thing, and now we're getting into this new region, we've bought in this new company, we've got this new capability, whatever it is, you can now pivot because you know where you stand. Any change? It's like a board game. Go back to stage one and keep going. The beauty of this is it's not like the game Sorry we have in the US where you get to be really mean to your brothers and sisters. Like they get up on a stage, and if you draw the right card, you get to make your brother go back to stage one. This isn't a mean game like that. That's just what, my mom used to make me play with my brother, but that's a different session about my personal therapy. Anyway, because you've documented, because you've been data-centric, because you've already have user stories, even when you change the system and change where you're starting out looking at that routine again, you already have that documentation, you already have the culture, you have that pivot strategy so that it's not personality dependent. I know we all have these people in our organizations that that's the guy, he's been here forever, go ask Joe. Joe's written his stuff down. Joe's now off on different projects, and you're still working. You're not creating fault just because you're changing horses or strategies, and that's part of the beauty too, is going back to step one isn't going over, it's really starting the engineering process to be more sophisticated as you go along. So how much data are we generating? 25 quintillion bytes of data a day. I think that's crazy. So quintillion bytes. I'll give you like a mind handle that you can actually like get your mind around. So guess how long ago 1,000,000 seconds? Any guesses? Technical people. All right, I'll give you a pass. A new one's coming. 1 billion seconds is 30 years ago. I still had collagen. Thank you. 1 trillion seconds ago, we still had dinosaurs. That was 30,000 years ago. So the quantum leap from 1 billion to even 1 trillion, we're talking about something that's not just like, hey, that's really big. We're talking about something qualitatively different because the quant has grown so incredibly large. If you don't have data stories, if you're not looking back at systems processing, if you're not leveraging systems that already exist, you're going to have a very hard time keeping up in this environment. So as the data owner, as the data steward, as the data custodian, you really are the fulcrum to value in your corporation or your organization of any kind. You become that person, as our customer said earlier. If you don't act as a steward, we simply won't do business with you because other companies are starting to catch up. Other countries are becoming more hospitable to data governance and control and partnering to make sure that it's secure and private in the functional way of data protection and privacy. So the bottom line is, and I've only got about 5 minutes left here, we put out this study, as I noted earlier. All of this you can find on trust.cisco.com, and this really is your report. We've got pretty graphics in there. It talks through all of the things we were talking about, from data friction to data loss and proportional investment in your data teams. And we're going to put out another one next year as well. So we're already working on next year's study and hoping to make it an even more enriched data set, but really looking at the trends. One of my first meetings with John Chambers when I joined the group, right as he was leaving and I was coming in, I'm sort of still scratching my head going, is there some sort of a causal relationship? I don't know. But I sat down with John and I said, John, what is the metric as you're transitioning into chairman of the board? What is the metric for privacy? Is it this? Is it this? And I gave him a bunch of options, and he said, let me stop you right there. At the board, we shouldn't be talking about operational things. Don't come and tell me about malware attacks. Don't come and tell me about how many privacy impacts you've done, because that's not really my job. I need you in operations to be operating to a certain level. He said, give me a trend. Help me figure out what I can influence in the market, in the world, with our customers. Help me have a trend. So what we started doing from that moment is starting to gather data from customers around the world, including ourselves as customer zero, and figuring out what is correlated. We don't know causality yet. I can't tell you for sure that if you get to a mid-level maturity model on your privacy engagement, that you're definitely going to lose a third less records. But I'm going to tell you, you're about 80% more likely to lose a lot less records if you're doing this investment, because I now have 3 years of data. I've only published twice because the results were so strong the first year we were scared of it. That's some freaky stuff. I was like, whoa, this data is very strongly correlated to having your data under control means faster business and lower loss. Even with the pernicious and creative and tremendously talented malware attackers of today, we still can fight back. in a very old-fashioned way, and I kind of dig it. So as I alluded to before, we've got a draft of the Scoping for Privacy Requirements workshop. Our first pilot, pun intended, was at Air New Zealand a couple years ago. I connected with our CPO on Twitter. It's a very private world out there. I got a tweet from the CPO of Air New Zealand, and she said, "Can you come down here?" I said, "Oh, I got no budget. I'm a privacy officer." She said, "That's great. I got planes." So we flew down there, and we actually looked across their digitization work. We had people in Air New Zealand shaking hands with each other. They were on the digitization journey, but hadn't really worked together. Lawyers and marketing people and IT people and architects from across the business coming together with their new digital plan. Then the second day, we worked on a very specific application that was germane to their business, already funded, and going out within the next 18 months. And then the final day was really the interesting day for me anyway, was getting the C-suite. We had everyone but the CEO, and he even sent a note saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I was like, "Dude, I'm flying home on your airplane. You do you, boo. We're fine." So we got everybody else in the room, and we did scoping workshops. As you see here, this is one that we did in Berlin, where we tried to gamify requirements. This is one that we just ran in Kiev with a bunch of developers in their very rich developer community to teach them the skills of privacy engineering. And then this is us at Air New Zealand. I came back about a year ago to check in on the team, and they were so great. They came up and they were like, "We hit this milestone and this milestone," and I was like, "I love that you look at us as part of your team. I don't actually work here." That's the kind of partnership I want to have with my customer. We want to figure out that digital transformation journey. I love hearing from their privacy team that the questions that they're getting from on high, from the board and the C-suite, and from the teams below are absolutely on-spot, high-quality questions germane to the business as well as taking risk off the table. Whoops, I went backwards, and I've only got 35 seconds left, so I can't mess up on my clicker anymore. So this is some of the stuff we do. Please check out the Privacy Sigma Riders podcast. We talk to CTOs from pharma. We talk to people that work against extortion and other issues impacting your family and your communities. Of course, our very own Irving Tam. I already told you a lot about Lord Ashfield. So I want to invite you and welcome you into the inaugural class of Australian privacy engineers, and thank you very much for your time and particularly for laughing at my jokes. Thank you.